Okay, sir. Slides are now visible.
Okay, go ahead.
As told by Venkateshwarlu sir, I shall be starting with the nutritional value of millets, and sir shall elaborate on the health benefits of these millets. Good evening to one and all here. So this you might have already seen. Just for the flow of presentation, I've started with this. Millets are small grain cereals belonging to Poaceae. They are among the oldest domesticated crops and presently cultivated in about 131 countries, and they are staple in tropical, subtropical, as well as temperate regions across the world. So, as I've already told, they are one among the oldest domesticated crops. And now recently, in the past 3 decades or so, we are hearing more about these grains. They were the oldest domesticated, and later on, knowingly or unknowingly, we have forgotten these crops. And now again, we are reviving the cultivation and the consumption of these grains. Why? Because they are addressing many of the global concerns. For most of the global concerns, including the climate change, which have been already touched by previous speakers. Now, I would like to highlight, based on the nutritional value of the millets. Millets are a solution for several public health problems, especially you might have been hearing the term, the double burden of malnutrition. Double burden of malnutrition is nothing but the coexistence of malnutrition or undernutrition as well as obesity. Because we know that even in developed countries, the hidden hunger or the deficiency of micronutrients is highly prevalent. We may be having enough of food. Whether our food is having enough amount of micronutrients, that is a question. And there comes the term hidden hunger, which refers to deficiency of micronutrients. And because of this, we may not be able to perform at our optimum. So that is hidden hunger. And also because of the increased consumption of refined foods, over-refined foods, we could say, because of that, there are increased incidents of lifestyle-associated disorders, especially the overweight or the obesity condition, which is further predisposing to several kinds of other lifestyle disorders, including diabetes, hypertension, all these disorders. So, millets are viewed as a solution for this, because for all the lifestyle-associated disorders, experts say that improving your dietary diversity is one of the solutions. And for improving the dietary diversity, we have no better candidates than the highly nutritious millet grains. So this is why millets are recently receiving their attention. And from heritage crops now, millets are viewed as smart crops, as they are good for consumers, they're good for farmers and good for planet. You might have already heard. Now, what is those aspects which is in millets, which is favoring the consumers? That is what we are going to see elaborately in the coming 40 minutes or so. Millets are nutritionally rich, and regular consumption of millets helps in reducing the incidence of lifestyle-associated disorders. So I shall be elaborating on the millets as source of sustainable nutrition. So this you might have already heard, major millets and small millets, because all of them are small grain cereals, and among them, because of the difference in size, they have been grouped into major or large ones. That is, sorghum and pearl millet are comparatively larger ones, and the small millets include finger, foxtail, little, proso, barnyard, and kodo millet because of their smaller size. The grain structure, they belong to either caryopsis or a trickle. Just I have included the cross-section of the grain structure. Sorghum and pearl millet belong to caryopsis. Finger millet belongs to a trickle. So just when we say about the nutritional composition, it will be easier for you to visualize where exactly these nutrients will be present. That is the main intention behind putting this image. Now, coming to the nutritional parameters, the bran or the outer layer. So after the husk will be the bran layer. The bran layer is where the phenolic compounds, which are bioactive compounds, will come to that in a little later. Then micronutrients like B vitamins and minerals, and the dietary fiber. Most of them are concentrated on the outer layer, which is the bran layer. And the endosperm portion, most of the starch, proteins, and some amount of the minerals are distributed in the endosperm layer of the grain, whereas the germ layer is a source of fat. Fat is concentrated in the germ layer and some amount of the B vitamins. So the innermost layer is the germ layer. The bigger one is the endosperm, and the other is the outer layer. So just below the hull, we have the bran layer. So now coming to the closer view of the grains, this is the first one is sorghum or jawar. So this is the closer view of these grains, and this is pearl millet or bajra. Second one, all of them are small sized grains. Third one here is foxtail millet. Kangani is the name. Then this is finger millet and mandua. Here one thing I would like to highlight. All these sorghum, bajra and finger millet can be consumed directly. Whereas for the other small millets, from the foxtail millet onwards, barnyard millet, kodo, little millet and proso millet, you can see that there is a husk where this husk has to be removed to convert them into the edible form. So the right side picture is the rice after dehulling. This is the rice of the respective millets. So except for sorghum, bajra and finger millet, dehulling has to be performed for all the small millets. So this is the dehulled grains of these small millets. Now coming to the actual topic, which is the nutritional composition of the millets. So here in this table, we have included the comparison of nutritive value of millets along with the wheat as well as rice. The values are mentioned here of is the raw rice in the milled form, and this is of whole wheat. So this whole wheat value seems to be little higher because it is the whole wheat nutritional value is taken, and mostly we use the flour or the atta to make it into roti or different type of preparations and then consume. So that value may slightly differ. So coming to our nutritional composition of millets, we can say from this table, we can say that millets are good source of proteins, micronutrients, as well as total dietary fiber. So several millets have a good amount of proteins, especially the proso millet, foxtail millet, all have a protein content which is higher than that of wheat. And if you could come down here, this is the dietary fiber. The dietary fiber values of millets are higher. Some of them like pearl millet, finger millet, and barnyard millet, and also proso millet are higher than that of wheat. So that's it. And if we see the fat values, cereals in general are low source of fat, and among the millets, pearl millet is having a better fat content, higher fat content, and that is the reason because the pearl millet flour often gets rancid after storing for for a week or so, it will get rancid. The reason behind that is the high fat content of the pearl millet. Now we'll see each one of these parameters in a little detail, not much. So the carbohydrates of cereals are mostly composed of not only millets, but also all the cereals are mainly composed of the starch. Starch is the major fraction of carbohydrate in case of all the cereals, like that in millets also. Then dietary fiber. Dietary fiber nowadays it is viewed as a separate component, not along with the carbohydrate. We'll come to that in a short while. We'll discuss about that little in a more elaborate manner. And apart from starch, we have the soluble sugars, which only contributes about 2 to 3% of the total carbohydrate will be your soluble starch, and most of it is the starch. The starch has two components, amylose and amylopectin. The relevance of this is because, see, if you could see the amylose composition, this is the average value. It all depends upon the genotypes. It may vary, but this is an average value which is published in one site. I got it from this particular site. So this says that wherever you have a higher amylose content, we should understand that that is a slow digesting carbohydrate. Based upon how the starch is responding to the digestive enzymes, we have three types of starch: rapidly digestible starch, slowly digestible starch, and resistant starch. As the name implies, the rapidly digestible starch is nothing but immediately it will get digested within 20 minutes or so. Once it is ingested, within 20 minutes it will get digested. Slow digestible starch will take more time to get digested. So the advantage here is that the slow digestible starch will be useful for certain targeted populations. For example, those who are having hyperglycemic condition. So if the food you are eating is having more amount of slow digestible starch, it implies that there is a good chance that only little amount of glucose will be released into your blood once you consume a food that is having lot of slow digestible starch. So this will be helpful for people with lifestyle associated disorders. And resistant starch will come along with the dietary fiber because it is resistant to the digestion by the digestive enzyme, and it will pass through the gut unaffected till it reaches the colon, where it will get fermented by the gut associated bacteria. So this is the amylopectin content. So in general, we could say that some of the millets are having good amount of amylose, which means that they have good amount of slow digesting carbohydrate. Again, it implies that it will be good food for hyperglycemic people. Coming to the protein, millets are well acclaimed for their non-glutinous nature, whereas wheat is having the gluten component in its protein, whereas millets are gluten-free, hence can be consumed by the celiac patients also. So here I have included some fraction of the protein, just to say that we know that in general, cereals are deficient in the essential amino acid lysine, whereas pulses are rich in lysine. So just to say that whenever the prolamine fraction of the protein is high, because the prolamine fraction is more of proline and cysteine, it is deficient in lysine. Whenever the prolamine fraction is predominant, in those cereals with a prolamine fraction as a predominant protein fraction, the lysine amounts will be less. So just like any other cereals, millets also have a deficient amount of lysine, which has to be complemented with a pulse or any other source of lysine in your diet. And among the millets, all millet, because it is having a because of the bigger size of the grain, it is having a much bigger germ layer. So the germ layer will have more amount of albumin and globulin, which is comparatively rich in lysine. So hence, pearl millet is known to have a better amino acid balance. Except for lysine, most of the other essential amino acid millets are having good amount of other essential amino acids. So this table specifies that. So except for lysine and also leucine. Now coming to the fat content, in general, cereals are having less amount of fat. Among the millets, pearl millet, also to some extent, foxtail millet is having good amount of fat. And one thing to say about the fatty acids of millet fat is that they are good in the unsaturated fatty acid, which is known to be a good fatty acid. The unsaturated fatty acid has several physiological role that will be beneficial for the body. So millet fat is having good amount of mono as well as polyunsaturated fatty acid. That is why the millet fat can be viewed as a source of healthy fat. Coming to the other important aspect, yesterday in the chat box, we have seen some of the questions. Wheat is also having good amount of nutrients, and why millets are preferred over wheat, especially for those who are having lifestyle disorders, all those things. One factor is that millets are gluten-free, and the second one is that they are having abundant amount of minerals, which no other cereal can match. If you could see this table, we can see that millets are good. Millets have good amount of micronutrients, which are distributed in the outer layers. This particular millet, finger millet or ragi, it has 10 times more calcium than as compared to any other cereal. So in the breeding lines we are testing, we could see much more higher values of these components. This is from a published table we have taken. So in general, they are good source of iron, zinc, and also calcium, and also some other minerals such as selenium, zinc, etc. So this will be very much helpful, especially in the diet of resource-constrained people. So sorghum, pearl millet, foxtail millet, and barnyard millet also good source of iron and zinc. So this is regarding some of the iron-rich varieties. This is for pearl millet. So the breeders are in constant work for developing all these varieties which are rich in micronutrients. So one such iron-rich pearl millet varieties, then Shakti, wherein we can see up to 72 ppm of iron is there. The other biofortified pearl millet names are given. Also small millets like finger millet, CFM-V1, CFM-2. Our course coordinator Ganapati sir is also involved in developing some of these varieties. Now, coming to the vitamin content of this, millets are rich in, like most other cereals, millets are rich in B vitamins, especially thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin. Most of this are concentrated in the bran layers. So those millets, for example, sorghum, pearl millet, also in finger millet, most of this will be retained because they are not subjected to much processing methods. So dehulling part is not involved. So mostly the vitamins will be conserved. So by consuming these grains, most part of these vitamins will be retained and that will be beneficial. So, in general, millets are good source of B vitamins, including thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin. Coming to this particular component, which is considered as a functional component in food. So this is dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is those component of food that is not digested by the endogenous digestive enzymes. Rather, it passes through the gut as such. Once it reaches the colon, it will get fermented by the gut-associated bacteria that is present in the colon or the large intestine. So we have two types of fiber, soluble and insoluble dietary fiber. These two has two different functions. The soluble fiber have a multiple role because the soluble dietary fiber, what it does is that this forms a gel-like substance. Once it reaches your stomach, it forms a gel-like substance, especially in the small intestine also. So what it does is that after forming this gel, it will try to absorb excess amount of water or the toxins like bile acids or some other toxins and excess of sugar, fat, excess of cholesterol, all these things it will trap. And it will take it through the digestive system till it reaches the colon. One way, that is one rule. And secondly, once it reaches the large intestine, it will get fermented by the bacteria and which will have several physiological roles, including the overall improvement of the health. So that way, soluble fiber is more beneficial. Insoluble fiber, again, it will get fermented in the large intestine. That way, it will benefit health. So this is the total dietary fiber of the millets. Again, this value seems to be little lower as compared to what we see in the breeding lines we test. Coming to the soluble fiber content, one such cereal is oats. Oats is having good amount of soluble fiber and similar to oats, not similar to oats, lesser than that only it is there in millets. So whatever is in the millets is presented in this table. We can see that the soluble fiber is good, present in good amounts in pearl millet, little millet, also in kodo millet. Compared to wheat, we have better amount of soluble fiber that is. So that way it can benefit the overall. So in health benefits, sir will be explaining that part also. And also, one more thing is the bioactive phytochemicals that is present in millets. Millets are abundant source of bioactive phytochemicals. So the thing is that these compounds, by virtue of their structure, they have an antioxidant property, which means it can neutralize some of the free radicals that is generated in our body because of several physiological functions. Also, because of the stress, it gets generated. So to neutralize these free radicals, the antioxidant activity of the phenolic phytochemicals that is present in millets will help. And hence, because of this particular property, because of the maintenance of this redox nature of the body, it has several beneficial roles that will be dealt in the next session. You will be seeing that also. So in general, millets are good source of bioactive phytochemicals, especially the colored sorghum. We will have a variety of phytochemicals having different bioactive roles in millets. So this table shows the phenolic content. You can see that finger millet, which is a darker grain, that is having good amount of phenolic phytochemicals. Similarly, kodo millet also. Other millets are also having good amount of phenolic phytochemicals, which are beneficial. And one more thing is that we'll get this kind of compounds, this phenolic compounds, only through the plant-based diet, not through any animal-based diet. So that way, the consumption of millets is important. Now, having told about the nutritional components, we should also tell about the anti-nutrients. Many times we will hear that millets are good. Millets are having a lot of anti-nutrient compounds. This is actually not only in millets, in most cereals, this anti-nutritional components are there. For example, phytic acid, which is a storage form of phosphorus in the seed. So in all the cereal grains, the phytic acid will be present. And oxalates are one other anti-nutrients, and tannins also are considered as anti-nutrients. Tannins are actually polyphenolic compounds. Their role is actually debatable because of their polyphenolic nature, they have good antioxidant activity. At the same time, the problem is that they will go and bind to the digestive enzymes. For example, if they go and bind to the proteases in the digestive system, that will affect the protein digestibility. So that way, higher amount of tannins in food is not advisable. However, if it is going and binding to the carbohydrate digestive enzyme, then it will be a functional food to particular targeted population, for example, hyperglycemic population. So that way, the role of tannins is debatable. Anyway, tannins will also give astringent taste to the food also. But the thing is that all the household processing techniques, the normal processing techniques we use, for example, the dehulling to make them edible, we perform dehulling, also soaking, germination, cooking, the fermentation, especially to prepare idlis and dosas, we'll do fermentation and then cook. So all those things, especially you can see that germination as well as fermentation are among those processing techniques that will help to improve the nutrients and also reduces the anti-nutrient content. So this is about the nutritional composition of millets. I shall stop here, and Venkateshwarlu sir will further proceed with the health benefits of the millets. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Malathi, for a very good presentation. So I'll share my presentation. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, dear participants, till now we have listened to a very good presentation by Dr. Malathi on composition of millets and how it is related to the health benefits. I will slightly emphasize on how they actually work in our human system to give details about the health benefits of millets. So as we all know, they are abundant sources of micronutrients. Micronutrients are those which are required in very small quantities. Say suppose if protein is required for a 50 kg person, we require around 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kg body weight. That means a 50 kg person will require around 40 to 50 gram of protein in their diet every day. Okay. So in such cases, these macronutrients are required in grams, while micronutrients are required in milligrams, sometimes even micrograms. Say suppose thiamine, requirement may be hardly 2 to 5 milligram per day. If you take vitamin B12, it is required in microgram quantities in every day. So like that, these micronutrients are required in very small quantities, and millets are rich sources of these micronutrients. For example, iron. The requirement of iron per person is around 1 milligram every day. Okay. So if you look at the most prevalent micronutrient deficiency in developing countries, it is iron deficiency leading to anemia. Why? Because most of the iron that is present in the diet is not bioavailable, and moreover, the quantity available is also less. If you take polished rice that we normally consume, or it is termed as white rice, it contains hardly 5 ppm. 5 ppm means it is 0.5 milligram per 100 gram of the rice you are eating. So 0.5 milligram is there in 100 gram, and out of that, only 10% is available. So that means you can see how little quantity of iron we can absorb from the diet. So in that case, diets rich in iron will help in absorption of more iron compared to diets poor in iron content. Of course, in case of plant-based diets, the bioavailability is slightly less compared to animal-based diets, because there the iron is already bound to heme of the hemoglobin, and it is easily absorbed by our intestines. So in actual experiments, it was found that Dhanshakti, which is iron biofortified pearl millet, consumption of this millet by school-going children over a period of 6 months has improved the cognitive performance and also blood biochemical parameters. So this shows that diets rich in iron really help in absorption of more amount of iron compared to those which are poor in iron absorption. Especially pregnant and lactating women are in more requirement of these micronutrients because their metabolism is on a higher side compared to normal activity. Similarly, consumption of iron-rich foods has shown in recent meta-analysis in case of 8 laboratory studies, showed that it has improved the blood hemoglobin content and also other related parameters. Consumption of finger millet, pearl millet, sorghum, and other millets has improved the hemoglobin content and also serum ferritin, which is a storage form of iron in case of human beings. So normally when any deficiency develops, that is because we have not been consuming particular nutrient for quite a period of time. So suppose if you don't eat food today or tomorrow, you will not develop deficiency immediately, because there are these micronutrient reserves available in the body, which will supply these nutrients for some time. But suppose if you consume deficient diets for 1 month or 2 months continuously, then there is a possibility of developing these nutritional deficiencies. Similarly, processing like fermentation, as Dr. Malathi has already explained, popping or malting, these will improve iron bioavailability by reducing the content of antinutrients. Similarly, the traditional practice of consuming sorghum and pearl millet is, first they will wet the grain with water and they will pound in the mortar and pestle. So when it is pounded with this mortar and pestle, the outer layer, what we call the seed coat, that will be removed, and that will remove some amount of phytic acid and other polyphenols or tannins present in the outer layers, so that the remaining grain portion is cooked as either sorghum or bajra rice. So in that way, traditionally the practices have helped in improving the bioavailability of these minerals. Similarly, finger millet is a very good case wherein the calcium content is 10 times more than any other cereal grain or millets. So nowadays we see a lot of people suffering from joint pains or musculoskeletal disorders. There are multi-pronged reasons for this. One is diets less in calcium and also less physical activity. On top of it, reduced vitamin D synthesis due to less exposure to sunlight. Because for bone metabolism, 3 things are very important: availability of calcium in the diet, then sunlight exposure or vitamin D in the diet. Along with that, there should be a moderate physical activity, so which will strengthen the bones. Bone mineralization will increase when there is a pressure on the bone. That pressure can be built only by contracting the muscles. So when these 3 things are ensured, people have better bone mineral density. It is very well proven in clinical studies and epidemiological studies that people having higher bone mineral density in their adolescent age will have less chance of developing osteoporosis when they are becoming older. So in such cases, it is important that our regular diet should have more amount of calcium and also combined with physical activity and sufficient sunlight exposure, so that we all can have better bone mineral density and bone health. Finger millet is a naturally available and affordable source of nutrition to all, because it can be consumed as a whole grain. It is also very rich in dietary fiber, and it can be consumed as a gruel also. You can boil water, just mix finger millet flour, and then drink it as a malt. Similarly, finger millet is usually used in rural areas as a weaning diet, wherein the flour is sieved to remove fiber content, and then the remaining flour content, which is a fine flour, which is easily digestible and also rich in calcium, is generally used as a weaning diet in case of infants. And millets are also important in management of hyperlipidemias and obesity. So we have a double burden of both undernutrition and also overnutrition. So overnutrition is due to consuming diets which are not balanced well and also consuming too much of diet. So not balanced well, I mean, the usual calorie requirement for a person is around 2000 to 2400 kilocalories per day. However, usually we have a particular requirement for protein content in the diet. As I already said, it is 0.8 to 1 gram per kg body weight. So once that protein content is satisfied, we do not eat too much of food. So then the remaining calories can be met from other components in the diet, because both carbohydrate and protein are going to give you same amount of calories. That is 4 kilocalorie per gram. And the fat will give you around 9 kilocalories per gram. So in that case, diets rich in fat adds too much of calories, and hence they will increase deposition of fat in the body. So now we have to balance between the carbohydrate and the protein. So by balancing the carbohydrate and protein, in the sense having sufficient amount of protein intake, you can naturally reduce the total amount of food you have to consume and the total amount of calories that you are consuming. In that way, we can reduce the total amount of fat deposition in the body. So in many meta-analysis, it was shown that consumption of millets has reduced the LDL cholesterol and VLDL cholesterol by around 8 to 9%. Similarly, there is an increase in HDL cholesterol content by around 5 to 6%. And also there is a reduction in the total body weight, which is indirectly reflected as body mass index. So normally we can calculate our body mass index by using our weight divided by square of height in meters. So that will give you a value called body mass index, BMI. So this body mass index between 18.5 to 24 is considered as normal. So beyond 25, you will call it as overweight, and beyond 30, it is obese. So by monitoring this body mass index, we can see where we are falling, and the chances of or risk of developing lifestyle diseases will increase if your body mass index is going beyond 25. So you can take early action by monitoring this BMI index. They are also useful in management of hypertension. I would say hypertension is a systemic disease wherein it is a response of overall body to the normal blood pressure. So normally when we are young and physically active, our blood pressure will be in the range of around 120/80. That's the ideal blood pressure. But as we age, normally it slightly increases. But if it is going beyond 140/100 or 160/100, we call it as hypertension. And hypertension is such a parameter which is controlled by a lot of hormones and also a tightly controlling angiotensin, renin-angiotensin mechanism, which regulates the blood pressure. So generally when we consume too much of water and salt, the pressure slightly increases, which will be further controlled by many mechanisms of water excretion, salt excretion by the kidneys and other mechanisms. So in such cases, it was also shown that some of the millets have effect on controlling the hypertension by overall improvement in the health. I mean, hypertension is not single parameter. It's related to a systemic disturbance in the body, which can be corrected by reducing our body weight and also having a healthy diet with less mental stress. And also they are helpful in management of diabetes and related complications. So as we all know, there is a genetic component in diabetes development. That means if your parents are having diabetes, the likely chance of you developing diabetes is high. So that genetic component, we cannot change it. However, what we can control is by changing the lifestyle and diet. To some extent, we can postpone the development of diabetes. So in such cases, these millet-based diets, because of their high dietary fiber content, they are digested slowly, and hence they release blood glucose into blood at slow levels, so that you don't find any spikes of glucose increase, which is normal in case of diabetics compared to those who are consuming high fiber diets. And there are different types of fibers also, like soluble dietary fiber, insoluble dietary fiber, which are also useful for the gut microbiota to survive better and were recently shown to help in reduce the development of obesity also. So a healthy gut microbial profile will help in reduction of obesity. And also they are important for improving the digestibility. And in case of carbohydrate digestion, many of these phenolic compounds in the diet, they will slightly reduce the digestion of the carbohydrates, like enzymes like amylase, alpha glucosidase, and pancreatic amylase, and thus enabling the management of postprandial hypoglycemia spikes. And also sorghum phenolic extract enhance insulin concentration in the diabetic mice, and phenolic compounds also reduce blood glucose levels by inhibiting hepatic gluconeogenesis. Here what we mean is, normally, suppose when a person is not consuming food per a day also, so our body will try to maintain blood glucose levels in a very close range, maybe around 80 to 120 mg per deciliter. Even if you don't eat for 2 or 3 days, the body will try to maintain the level of glucose at around 80 mg per deciliter. That is by producing glucose in our liver itself from other sources like glycerol or gluconeogenic amino acids. So the protein will be broken down and the amino acids will be used for increasing the glucose content in the blood, because our brain is entirely dependent on glucose supply. Although other parts like cardiac muscle or skeletal muscle, they can survive with fatty acids and ketone bodies, but our brain is entirely dependent on glucose. Hence, the body has mechanisms for controlling the glucose levels. So in a healthy subject, they will be very well controlled. But in case of diabetic patients, the control is not proper. So these control mechanisms are not working at their optimal rates. That is why we are having hyperglycemia or diabetes related complications. So this parameter, what we call the ability of the body to adapt or control, is called metabolic plasticity. So metabolically, how much you can stretch your body. So if the body is losing that, then we cannot be having very low or very high physical activities. So we have to be well balanced in doing these activities. So they are also important for complications related to diabetes, like many of the bioactive compounds present in the gut, which are released by the digestive enzymes, will act on the gut and show some effect on reducing the complications of the diabetes. In some studies, it was shown that finger millet phenolics, they were able to prevent the formation of the glycation products by inhibiting aldolase or aldose reductase enzyme, which is present in the lens of the eye. So in the eye lens, when there is a higher amount of glucose, which is converted into other glucose derivatives, they cause development of cataracts by changing the osmolarity of the lens protein. So if the lens protein becomes precipitated, then light will not pass through the lens. So in such cases, reduction of this aldose reductase enzyme will help in postponement of these cataracts. So as we age normally, many people develop cataracts. Also, people lose the pliability of the lens. Usually people get like reading glasses after 40. That means the flexibility of the lens is being lost. So similarly, over a period of time, after 10 years or 20 years, people develop cataract. So by consuming diets rich in these finger millet phenolics, we can postpone the development of these cataracts. Similarly, many of these radical scavenging molecules like polyphenols and some tannins and deoxyanthocyanidins found in sorghum, they have very good antioxidant activity. That means they can scavenge some of the free radicals that are produced in the either normal metabolic pathways or due to stress. So in such conditions, by acting as antioxidants, they can prevent development of cancers, especially in the gastrointestinal tract, like colon cancer. And the prebiotic effect is promoted by the dietary fiber, wherein the undigested dietary fiber will go into the large intestine and will be fermented by the microbiota of the gut. So those microbiota can survive better on certain types of dietary fiber. So if dietary fiber is lacking in the diet, then within a few days, our microbiota profile will change. The type of microorganisms that are supported will change. And that will have some effect on our overall health. So that way, the best example is when you consume only meat or less fiber diet, you can immediately see the effect next day. because the diet is lacking in the dietary fiber. So, but when you consume a diet with sufficient dietary fiber, you will have a different experience because of the support by dietary fiber on the microbiota. So these fermentation products of this fermentation by microbiota release many short chain fatty acids, which have excellent gut health promoting effects and are also showing some effect on the metabolic system. So these short chain fatty acids like butyrate can prevent serious diseases such as colorectal cancer. And also they promote normal phenotype in colonocytes by repairing any DNA damage and also induce death of transformed cells. So these are the benefits associated with millets based on their composition. So we have seen the composition and different variety in millets and how they can promote the health benefits. If you look at the consumption pattern, traditionally it is consumed as like stiff porridges or gruels or roti or cooked rice is also in many cases. Then flour-based sweets or savories or beverages. So they are suitable for preparing products like any other flour, like rice or wheat, those things. So in that case, traditionally people used to process at their home level and consume. In that case, most of it is a what you call whole grains. But many times, if you want to store the grain for too long period, then you might need to polish them quite a bit or refine the flour so that you can store it for a longer time and consume. But however, it is preferable to consume them as fresh as possible so that most of the nutrients available need not be disturbed. And contemporary snacks like flakes, semolina, breakfast cereals, noodles, bakery products are also becoming common. So in these cases also, if the product is prepared at local level, say suppose you need not transport the grain, suppose dehulled grain. If you want to transport dehulled grain over very long distances, so if it might take around 2 to 4 months to transport from one part of India to another part. So in that time, the grain may not be storable for so long because of development of rancidity. So in such cases, what people do is they will polish it too much. So when you polish too much, you are removing some of the nutrients. So that way, by promoting a local approach wherein you consume, produce a local area, processed in the local areas and consumed in the surrounding areas. In that way, we can help in improving the availability of these nutrients. And Indian Institute of Millets Research is having a NutriHub and technology business incubator, which is helping in promotion of millets through entrepreneurship. We have training courses like N-Grain and Nest, and also a startup ignition program, which provides you some grant based on your ideas. And in the overall benefits, I will just briefly say. So sorghum is having less digestible starch and hence low glycemic index. With whole grain consumption, you can have good amount of vitamins and minerals. Similarly, pearl millet is one of the richest sources of micronutrients like iron and zinc, and is also having better amino acid profile. Finger millet, as we all know, is a very rich source of calcium. And foxtail millet is also having a balanced nutrient profile. Little millet, proso millet is a very good source of protein content, sometimes going up to around 18%. Then similarly, kodo and barnyard millets are also rich source of phytochemicals, dietary fiber, and many processing, traditional processing techniques, say suppose dosha or any fermentations. They not only reduce the antinutritional factors, but also increase the vitamin content by actively growing cells. So that way, many of our diets will become wholesome. Then many in vitro and in vivo studies has shown that millets are having better health profile, and availability of processing machines is also increasing for both primary processing and also secondary processing, so that these products will be widely consumed, and many millet-based functional foods will also find way into the market soon. So yeah. So with this, I'm concluding my presentation, and thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for covering most of the aspects, health beneficial aspects of millets and even nutritional aspects of millets, all the millets. You have covered in detail about millets health benefits. Thank you very much for that. And even we thank Malathi madam